we're going to talk about a subject that was prompted by what was happening at the forum a little bit. And Kat over here is one of the moderators, and she can tell you it was a busy week. Of course, Denny is the webmaster, and Dennis intervened a few times himself, because sometimes these discussions get a little out of hand. Basically, we teach that you're not supposed to teach on the forum. And the main reason for that is many times it turns into heresy. But people can't always distinguish what is or what isn't heresy. And therefore they give their opinions, and if somebody reads it on our forum, they say, well, this is what they teach on Ray's forum. Yeah, but Ray doesn't teach that on Ray's forum. Somebody else does, and we don't always agree. That's like these disclaimers for people on television, Not everything said here today is according, whatever. All right, so there was a discussion. Apparently there's this young man who's living with another woman, and he claims that it's fine, there's no sin in that they did they exchange vows or something, or no? But they're husband and wife. Yes?
I think they are in the eyes of God.
They think they're husband and wife. They did not actually exchange vows.
No.
I don't know if he said that specifically. And this thing has been going on for, a whole week. And just dozens and dozens of people getting into, well, no, you shouldn't do this. Well, yeah, I see your point. Yeah, maybe you are married, and blah, blah, blah. So today I want to try to cover this because it's not as easy a subject as people might think. The title of this subject is, What is Marriage? But Dennis has been after me, and Bob Carlisle here too, for a long time to talk about love. What is this agape and phileo, and what are all these different loves mentioned in the Bible? Hey, sweetheart. Anyway, so it says love your enemy. Well, some of us find that hard to do. You got to love your neighbors yourself. And are we able to? Do you know what that means? Well, I think most people do not. And there's a little bit of a problem in translation and words. And there's a more huge problem, a huger problem in just spiritual understanding. So I'm going to talk about love. First, I'm going to talk about marriage. What is marriage? What constitutes marriage? And so on. I'm not going to talk about the marriage state, how to have a happy marriage, how to be in bliss like me and my wife, or any of that stuff. That's the subject for another Bible study. But what we're going to talk about specifically, in detail, what is marriage? Okay? Can you just marry yourself? Say, well, we live together, I kind of think of you as my wife. Well, yeah, I kind of think of you as my husband. Well, I guess we're married. We don't need a piece of paper. What's a piece of paper? People who get pieces of paper get divorces. That's nothing. We love each other. We're more married than they're married. Sounds good. Ain't much truth to it, though. And I will talk about it. Now, I'm going to open it up here for a second. I have, what is marriage? Is a license and a ceremony required? That's the subheading. So I'm going to ask you all, what is marriage? Anybody, just give me some idea. What is marriage? Anyone? I don't want to know what's a good marriage. I want to know what is the meaning of the word. Anyone?
Two people living together and sharing their life and working things together.
No. Anyone else?
A union created by God.
Closer. Anyone else?
A mutual commitment.
No. Partly, but no. It would never fit the overall definition. Anyone else? Come on, we're talking marriage. Everybody. I'm sorry, sweetheart. I forgot your name already. Jamie. I mean, you two might be married one day. You're going to know what it's all about. And it's not what most people think. And people be dumbfounded when they find out what the Bible has to say about marriage. I'll tell you what it has. I'm going to leave you a little secret. The marriage state, that is the institution of two people being married together, sharing their lives together, living in a home, producing children, so on and so forth. The Bible has virtually nothing to say. Yet the word marriage, is in there over and over and over and over and over. But not what I just said. Anyone else want to take a smack at this?
Is it two flesh becoming one flesh?
No. Not even close. You would think so, though, wouldn't you? Isn't that part of it? I mean, Christ himself said that. Right? It's part of it. It does not fit the definition of marriage, though, at all. Not even at all.
Two people joined together by God.
That's what I said. A contract.
Now we're getting closer. I'm telling you, Harry over here, he, so many, he just nails it sometimes. He just nails it. Now we're getting into it. A contract. Marriage is a contract. Now, maybe a more important question would be, is love required to make a marriage?
No.
Right on. No. Love does not even enter into the definition of a marriage. Does not. Proof? How many arranged marriages have there been in the world? Millions. Do most of them, when they get married, arranged marriage, do they love each other? Most of them. They don't even know each other. Okay. I'll ask one more thing. Does sexual union have to be involved in the definition of a marriage? Anyone?
Is that like signing? Is that the final signature?
I'm asking you. I'm asking the questions today, Denny.
Well, unless in the world,
Probably
unless you are consummated, you can annul it, can't you?
How long do you have to do that? 2 years? 8 years?
As long as you want.
See, now we're putting time limits on it, right?
If you're Catholic, it doesn't matter.
Sex and love has nothing to do with the definition of marriage. Nothing to do with and I'm going to prove it to you in just a second. Nothing. So what is marriage? Okay? We're going to find out. We're going to find out. And we're going to answer two questions today. We're going to answer what is marriage and what is love. And get ready for a revelation, because this may not all be what you think it is. I received an email from all these tens of pages, and one of them contained this, so I took it out, because this is the person who is living with this person, says, we're married. And here's what he says. I can't believe you would call that sinful living. Maybe Babylon is right. Maybe we do need to have physical circumcision and a physical water baptism and a physical wedding ritual, etc., etc., etc. Everything's physical. It's all physical. Perhaps even God's law is physical. And it matters not whether you truly love your wife or not. As long as you got that physical marriage license, you're good to go. And there is no law of the land that says it's illegal for two people to live together without having a marriage license. Huh? Is there a law that says you can't do that? That sounds good. I mean, the guy's spouting off, all this worldly wisdom. Of course, I have a little statement here, brackets. I say, likewise, there is no law of the land that says when two people live together that they are legally husband and wife either. Is there?
Common law.
Huh?
Common law.
Doesn't make them. You can claim it sometimes, but the powers that be do not make you husband and wife.
That's right.
They do not. And he says maybe in the Dark Ages, this would be, or the Old Testament, but not now, not in the United States, nor Europe, or any other civilized society, perhaps in the Middle East, but they're still physically stoning people. So I wouldn't want to follow that law of the land. God declares who is man and wife, not some magistrate or a piece of paper. Sounds good, doesn't it? I mean, this guy, he's just really nailing it, right?
Yes, sir.
Wrong, paleface. I put in brackets, are magistrates and pieces of paper worthless and ungodly? What sounds like from his perspective they are. I know Adam and Eve were husband and wife. That's why I use them as an example of how you can be married in God's eyes under God's spiritual law without having a physical wedding ritual. Period. End of quote. And I say, what do I usually say at a point like that?
Oh, really?
Oh, really? And he knows for a fact that Adam and Eve had no wedding. He knows that for a fact. There is not a civilized culture or race on the face of the earth that has not or does not recognize marriage between a man and a woman. Now, there are a few uncivilized. We know of one, right, hon? Where are they? South America? The Yacanomos. Where do they live? In Brazil. Just a backwoods Indian tribe, and they just they have nothing to do with husband, wife, family. They just do their own thing, I guess, right? Huh? The women and the men, but they get together sometimes at night, right? After tea. or the race wouldn't go on, right? Okay, but all civilized cultures have that. And it is an ordained institution of God supported in both the Old and the New Testament. Marriage is really more physical than it is spiritual from a scriptural point of view. Boy, I can see the stones coming for saying that. But it's true. It's true. First of all, if marriage, we're talking about the definition of the word, what the word actually means. If marriage is a spiritual institution as opposed to a physical, carnal institution, why do 50% of the people who get married get divorced? What's spiritual about that? Right? If it were spiritual, I mean, if all the people got married in a spiritual relationship, there would hardly ever be a divorce. But it's not. People go into marriage with a carnal mind, with physical expectations. Now, most couples who get married do love each other. I'm not saying they don't. I'm just saying it's not a spiritual union. They love each other and they have sex together. But the truth of the matter is, neither one is required to define what a marriage is. Neither one. Just because you're married to someone doesn't mean that you love them. Right? Is that right? Does anybody agree with that? Doesn't mean you love them just because you're married. And just because you love somebody doesn't mean you're married to them. Am I also right? I mean, there are lots of people who fall in love with somebody else's wife. That doesn't make them married. Say, she's my wife. Why? I love her. You can even say, I love her, and her husband don't. Her husband doesn't. It doesn't matter. She's still his wife, not yours. Why? Why is she his wife and not yours if he doesn't love her and you do? Why? According to this guy, what I just read, she should belong to the man who loves her, not to the man who is legally married to her. But that's not the way it works, because that is not the definition of a marriage. Now we're going to go through some terms. And we're going to get very specific, and you're going to be blown away by what all these terms mean. Okay? The first one I have is marriage. Marriage comes from the Greek word gamos. The first definition from Dr. Strong for marriage is nuptials. Nuptials, marriage, wedding. Okay? Then, this is also a definition from those, who studied this out many more hours than I have. The ceremony and its proceedings, including the marriage feast. That's the definition of marriage. Right out of the Bible. Okay? Now, do you see sex in there? Intercourse. Love. Nope. Let me read it again. Nuptials, I'm going to define nuptials next. Marriage, wedding. The ceremony, and I capitalized this because I want to show it to you over and over and over again. I'll blow you away. The ceremony and its proceedings, including the marriage feast or the marriage supper, or what we call in the Western world the reception. Right? Okay, so the first definition by Dr. Strong is nuptials. What are nuptials? Nuptials, as a noun, it means a wedding ceremony. That's right out of Webster's dictionary. A wedding ceremony. Has nothing to do with being married together, having intercourse, loving each other, producing children. Nothing. It means a wedding ceremony. And the reason I decided to do this was because this person is so hung up on the fact that ceremony has nothing to do with marriage, right? The fact of the matter is, what he thinks is marriage has nothing to do with the definition of marriage. 180 degrees. Opposite direction. Now that's the noun for nuptials. Here's the adjective. Relating to marriage or the wedding ceremony. You can just go through, and I've got several dictionaries. Go to dictionary after dictionary after dictionary to the Strong's. You can look up all the words for marry, marrying, marriage, matrimony, wedding. Look them all. They all produce the same truth. The wedding ceremony. All right? What is a wedding? Get all these words down. What is a wedding? The act of marrying, the ceremony of a marriage. It's the definition of a wedding. Nothing to do with living together, rearing children, loving each other, having sex. Nothing. All right? Now we'll go to, we had the word marriage. Now we go to the word marry. It's a little different. Marriage is gamos in the Greek. Marry is gamio. First definition, gamio. To wed. What is a wedding? The act of marrying, the ceremony of a marriage. The ceremony. The exchanging of vows. The covenant agreement. That's what marriage is. Interesting, huh? Marry means to wed. To unite a man and a woman in wedlock. It's the uniting process. It's not the going to bed process on the honeymoon. It's the actual uniting. The wedding feast, the nuptials, the contract, the oaths. Now we'll go to the word wed. Wed means to take a spouse, to marry, to perform the marriage ceremony. Huh? Now let's go to the word matrimony. The act of being married, marriage, used, it's used but one time that I know of in the entirety of the New Testament, and that's in Hebrews 13:4, where it says that matrimony, is to be honored and the bed not defiled. In other words, there it is talking about the actual institution of marriage when you come past the actual ceremony and you come to the bed. The bed. In other words, going to bed with your wife is to be honored, is not something to be thought of as being a dirty or a defiled thing. But that's, I think, the only time that matrimony, you could put the word marriage in there, but it's really talking about the state of marriage, and matrimony maybe fits a little better. Now let's look at one other word, and this is the word espoused. Because in 2 Corinthians 2, I'll turn there, because this is another interesting verse. When you look at all these words with an open mind and just let the Scripture speak, there's no contradiction. These things are all in perfect harmony. Now, 2 Corinthians 11 and verse 2, we read this. Paul says, would to God that you would bear with me a little in my folly, and indeed bear with me. For I am jealous over you with a godly jealousy, for I have espoused you to one husband, that I may present you as a chaste virgin to Christ. Now, what do we learn from this? Well, quite frankly, quite a lot. Paul says, all my teaching of the gospel to you is to get you ready to be Christ's bride. To clean you up, see? A chaste virgin. Now, some of these people he's talking to and about are married. How are they going to be virgins? Spiritually, virgins. Of course, he's using an analogy. Like a virgin, oops, it sounds like Madonna. Like a virgin is supposed to be clean and pure, and that is why they wear a white gown, isn't it? You know? So, in the same way, spiritually, Paul says, I am espousing you as a chaste virgin to Christ. What does that mean, espoused? Does this mean premarital sex? Try it out, see if it works good before you take the leap or something like that. No. Here, now I'll go into espoused mean betrothed. You've heard of that, the word betrothed. Same word basically. And here's what it is. It's a promise to give in marriage to marry. And what is marry? To wed. What is wed? The ceremony of a marriage. The ceremony, right? It's the nuptials, the exchange of vow, the covenant. Espousal, now notice this, was as legally binding as marriage. Did you know that? It was as legally binding as marriage itself. When you were espoused or betrothed to another, the way it was done in Israel, you could call that woman your wife. And she could call you officially and legally her husband. But you couldn't sleep together. Not till you were fully married. But when you were espoused to one another, it had a covenant contract all by itself before the wedding ceremony and the nuptials, which was another set of oaths and promises and covenant. And the way it worked was, it was confirmed by oaths with a friend or a legal representative for the bridegroom, and the bride was represented by her own parents. So even what we would call this today is an engagement, I guess, right? We're engaged. That is, we've already determined we want to be married, we just haven't done it yet. So it's similar to that. But in Israel, it was a little more legal. Today you can say, I'm sorry, honey, but here's your ring back. I'm out of here. And it's all over. You don't have to get an espousal divorce, you see.
That's sort of like what Mary and Joseph were.
Mm-hmm. That's why people don't understand it. Calls them a wife, calls them a husband, say, how can it be? They're not even married. They were legally espoused.
Say who?
And you can call it husband and wife. What?
The microphone probably didn't pick up Kathy, so explain what you're talking about.
Oh, what did you say again? Mary and Joseph, yeah. They were considered husband and wife before they married. That's why. Now let's go back to this man's initial complaint or foolish statement. Let's see. I know Adam and Eve were husband and wife. That's why I use them as an example. They were married in God's eyes, God's spiritual law, without having a physical wedding ritual. And that's where I gave it oh really? Okay. Now let's look at this. Genesis 22. Now you can say, well, Ray, maybe I think you might be stretching somebody's point. I don't care. I think I have the Spirit of God I think I speak what is moral and right and scriptural. And maybe some won't agree with it. And maybe, Kathy, you'll have more work to do this week in the forum. But I'm going to speak my mind here because I think I know what I'm talking about, and I know what the Scripture says, and I know what some of these words mean, and furthermore, I know how they're used, and I know the mind of Christ on this very thing because He reflected back to the Garden of Eden when He was talking about what? Being legally married or not, and whether or not you could legally divorce. Okay? Now, so in Genesis 22, let's notice something. Genesis 2:22. Here it says where the Lord had taken from the man and made a woman. But the last phrase I want. And brought her unto the man. Now, right there we can learn something. So they're not husband and wife, but he brings the woman to the man. This is the first time they connect. Okay? Genesis 2:22. Now, guess what? I just learned this morning because I'm looking so many references, just to be sure I got all these. So I looked in the strong in the concordance with the word. I think the word espousal. And guess what the word means? Not the definition of the word, but what the word means in the Greek. What the actual word means? It means to connect. It means to connect. God brings Eve to the man. They connect. I can see this as an espousal. They're now connecting for the first time. God put them together. He could have let them just wander around the garden one day and say, "Whoa, who are you?" And she say, "My name be Eve. I be a girl." "What's a girl?" "Well, look, we're different." "Oh, okay. Yeah, so you are." Of course, I went through what that difference was at the last Bible conference, right? How did he look at Eve and said, "You're bone of mine"? How did he know? He just woke up out of a sleep. How did he know that? He knew he was missing something and she had it. That's how he knew. I don't think God took a rib. Why would he take a rib? What does a rib have to do with masculine and feminine, It's just a bone. But there are parts of the body that are a little bit more specific as to what's a man and what's a woman. Okay, so now notice what happens next here. So God brings them together. That's what an espousal is. A betrothal. Brings together. Verse 23, and Adam said, "This is now bone of my bone and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman because she was taken out of man." You read that and you say, well, all right, so he says, she came from me and I'm going to call her woman. Oh, we can learn more from that. The word woman, okay, see if I have this in my notes here. See. Okay, let's look at, I'll get there in a second. Matthew, I'm still doing with this joined, connecting. Matthew 19:24. Matthew 19:24. Here's Jesus Christ is talking to the Pharisees. Is that right? 19:24? No, 19:4. I thought that was wrong. And he answered and said unto them, "Have you not read," they said, "Is it lawful a man to put away his wife for any reason, every cause?" And he says in verse 4, "Have you not read that he which made them at the beginning made them male and female?" Well, we read that a couple verses before here in Genesis, right? Made them male and female. And of course he made the female out of the male, we know that. And he said, "For this cause shall a man leave his father and mother, and shall cleave unto his wife, and they twain shall be one flesh." Now here's the important part. The next verse, verse 6. "Wherefore they are no more twain, but one flesh. What therefore God has joined together." Huh? How did Adam and Eve become wife They just went to bed. They said, this feels good. Or should we be a couple? Yeah. Well, should we get married? No, we don't get married. We just, I take you as my wife and you take me as my husband. We don't need marriage. We like, living together, having sex together. We're husband and wife now. Is that how Adam and Eve started their marriage? I mean, this person concedes that they were husband and wife. Is that how they start? No. God has joined them together. God joined them. When is a man and a woman joined together? When they have sex on the honeymoon? No. It's part of the ceremony of entering into marriage. It's not a part of just being together after you're married. What God has joined. There's a point where the joining starts, where they're apart. So now we can put together, God brought the woman to the man. That's like an espousal. Then He joined them together. How did He do that? Did He push their bodies together? Come on, let's not get lewd. He joined them together as a husband and wife in the garden before they ever came together or had sex or had children. God joined them together. That's what nuptials are. You take a vow. And what happens at the end of the ceremony? What does the minister usually say? Exactly, Kathy. I now pronounce you husband and wife. Why? Because they are now joined together. Did they have sex? No. What did they do? They took the vows. They formed a covenant in the front of witnesses in a ceremony called a wedding in a public gathering. That's what marriage is. It's the joining of an unmarried man and an unmarried woman together in a public setting with witnesses, exchanging vows and making a covenant to be husband and wife to one another as long as you both shall live. That's what a wedding is. That's what nuptials are. That's what marry means. That's what a marriage is. That's what starts the matrimony of two couples, okay? Now, so, God brought them together, an espousal. He joined them together. This is a covenant agreement. Adam said, in the presence of God and Eve, there are witnesses, this is now bone of my bone and flesh of my flesh. That was not just a casual observation. That was also a spiritual statement of intent. And he says, and she shall be called my wife. Is that what it says? Well, actually, it doesn't in the King James. It says she shall be called woman. But the word there, translated woman, is Isha Nashim. Isha Nashim. And it's translated hundreds and hundreds of times in the Old Testament Bible as wife. God brought them together. God joined them together. Adam says, she will be my wife. Huh? Are we having a little ceremony here? I think so. Okay. And this is very physical and this is very verbal. There's nothing very real. There's nothing really spiritual about this. This is all a physical thing, exchanging of, I see what she is, I take her for my wife. God brought them together for that reason. Next. Genesis, I don't have the scripture there, but I'll refer over to it. In Genesis 1 and verse 22. You understand the second chapter gets kind of a repeat. The first one says he created the man and the woman. The second chapter tells how he created the man and the woman. Created the woman out, But when we go back to the first chapter there in verse 28, we read this. Because now we have the man and the woman together. So we know that what he's saying here happens after he brought Adam and Eve together. Okay? And here's what he says. And God blessed them. Right? This is before they were husband and wife having children. This is a ceremony. He blessed them. And I do have this scripture down. It's not unlike Genesis 12:2, where God says the very same words to Abraham. He says, I will bless you. And we know what that is. It's the covenant. It's the covenant with Abraham that he will not only bless the people and descendants of Abraham, but through one of his seed, Jesus Christ, he will bless the whole world, the entire human race. And that's a covenant there in chapter 12, verse 2, when he says, I will bless you. It's a covenant. And when he says, and God blessed them, he's making a covenant with them. And notice what he says next. And God said to them, be fruitful. Let me get a little vulgar here. He said, have sex and make babies. They didn't do it yet. That's why he's telling them to do that. Now, I have not normally done it when I married a couple in a ceremony to say, to necessarily, bless this family with children. Maybe they don't even want children, Say, Ray, don't pray that. We don't want kids. Well, whatever. Most couples do, but maybe not everyone does. But here, he's saying, he blesses them and he tells them to be fruitful. Now, the only way they can be fruitful is they got to have sex. Right? And then they're going to produce babies. And then, if you want to take in time sequence, he says, and replenish the earth, have dominion, and so on. And God said, behold, I have given you every herb seed that's upon the face of the earth, and every tree which is the fruit thereof, and so on, to be meat for you. I mean, it even follows the same pattern as today, You have the ceremony, and then you have a reception where everybody does what? They eat and drink. So God says, He brought them together, espousal, He joined them together. Adam says, I take this woman as my wife. God blesses them, says, have sex, make babies, and all this food is yours to eat now. It's like a reception. Okay, let's move on. Now let's go to chapter 5 and verse 2. There's another little aspect of the same thing that he did. But we learn a little here, a little there, a little. But it all happened at the same time. At the time Adam and Eve were brought together, but before they were having sex and producing babies. This is the ceremony. This is the marriage, you see. Now we read this in chapter 5 and verse 2. He says, he reflects back on Adam and Eve in the day that he created man. And he says, male and female created he them. And, notice it, and blessed them. And what else did he do when he blessed them? Where did he bless them? Back in the garden. We just read it. He made Adam and Eve, and then he blessed them, and he said, have sex and make babies. And then later on he says, before they even got to that, he brought them together. Adam says, I'll take you for my wife, you see. But now he adds one more thing in this blessing that took place back there earlier in the garden. He says, male and female created them, and blessed them, and called their name Adam in the day when they were created. He called their name one name. Does that ring a bell? Even today, when two people get married, you got two different last names, and as a symbol and signification that you are one, you take the same name. Isn't that amazing? He called their name, Adam's name, and Eve's name, Adam. humanity. Actually, it means humanity. But it's one name. Why? Because Christ said, when he explains this thing, when Adam, what God had joined together, let no man put asunder, they shall be one flesh. And then when we read the next verse here, in chapter 2 and verse 24, therefore shall a man leave his father and his mother, and cleave unto his wife, and they twain shall be one flesh. Okay? Now, I contend that God did have a wedding ceremony for Adam and Eve. And I think the Scriptures prove it. You put all the Scriptures together. God did the creating. He brought them together. Adam accepted that, and the wife obviously went along with it. Although you don't see her collaborating here at all. He says, I take her to be my wife. Adam says, good. I'm going to bless you now. I want you to come together sexually as one flesh. I'm going to give you one name. You're going to be one flesh, one name. Have children. And all this good food is for you. I say, this is a wedding. This is a ceremony. So the idea that, well, they didn't have no ceremony. They just decided to go to bed and become husband and wife. Not true. Read the Scriptures. Read all of them. And you know what? There may be more. I mean, I just put this together in basically a day, and there was a lot to put together, you know. And I did other things. I answered emails and ran errands and whatever else I had to do. So, you know, if I would have spent weeks on this, who knows what else you could come up with. There may be a lot more that I even overlooked. But I think there's enough here to make the point, okay? What is a wedding? What is a marriage? Okay, so that's just the first point of what is a marriage. Now we go to point 2, okay? From a scriptural point of view. Marriage is a covenant. And I'm going to quote just some excerpts that I took from Rotherham's translation from Malachi, the 2nd chapter, rather than the King James. Yet you say, for what cause? Because Jehovah has been witness between you and the wife of your youth, with whom you have dealt treacherously, though she... Now, here's where we learn one more aspect of what God has to say constitutes a marriage. Which you dealt treacherously with, she was the consort and your covenant wife. Yeah? What does God throw in here as a necessary part of being legally married and being a husband or a wife? A covenant. A covenant. And we saw from the tradition of Israel, even the espousal, even the what am I trying to say? The engagement was legal. Okay. I have a little note here that they have found actual marriage contracts, Jewish marriage contracts, that go back to the 5th century BC. So this idea of, well, they didn't have ceremonies. Yes, they did. Yes, they did. And in fact, Malachi was written about 500 BC. Point 3, Jesus used the wedding ceremony in a parable. Then saith he to his servants, the wedding is ready. The wedding. What is the wedding? The ceremony. The wedding is the ceremony. The wedding is ready, but they which were bidden are not worthy. Are we bidding people here to the married couple's house or into their bedroom while they're having intercourse or something? This is the ceremony of getting married. So he puts his approval on the ceremony, because that's what it is. The wedding is the marriage ceremony. That's what it is. And Christ is putting his approval on it and building a parable around it. Number 4, Christ's first miracle was at it says the marriage, the marriage at Canaan, I think in the King James, it should be wedding. The only place where that word marriage really fits is in Hebrews 13 verse 4. Where it says the bed is undefiled and so on. Where I think Concordant has it translated matrimony. This was a wedding. And he was invited, he came, he put his approval on it by turning water into wine and contributing to the marriage festivities. The marriage supper. Number 5. We are espoused or betrothed to Christ in chapter 11, verse 2. We already went through that to some extent. And this is talking about the betrothal. Okay? The espousal. Before even the wedding ceremony. See? And why does he call us espoused to Christ? Because we're not married yet to Christ. When are we to be married at Christ? When does the Scripture say? In the resurrection, right? And what is that marriage? What does it say there in Revelation 19 that marriage is going to be like? What are we going to have?
A wedding ceremony?
That's right, a wedding ceremony. Uses the word marry twice there, or marriage. In verse 7, chapter 19, verse 7, it says marry. Okay? But that's the contract or the covenant, you see. Then you go down to verse 9, and then it adds a word to marriage. The marriage supper. Yeah? This is all part of the festivities of a marriage ceremony, not marriage itself. Okay? So when you start reading when you read marriage in the Bible, especially in the New Testament, you're going to have to readjust your thinking. It's not talking about the marriage state. It's talking about getting married. Always getting married. The ceremony. All right. Number 7. Jesus likewise likens the spiritual union with the elect with virgins waiting for Christ the bridegroom to return for a wedding. Matthew 25:10. A wedding, the ceremony. He's called the bridegroom. You know what a bridegroom is. That's somebody who has not yet exchanged the vows or the oath to become the husband. That's why he's the bridegroom. It all has to do with before marriage and during the ceremony and the supper and festivities connected with it. Almost every place you read it in the Bible that this person says, and did anybody agree with this person at all? A couple did, didn't they? It's not true. It's just totally off base. Number 8. Sex outside of marriage is adultery and whoredom by definition. Of course, most people, are guilty of that. Yours truly included. But that is the fact. It's called adultery and whoredom. Now, notice, now we come to Hebrews 13, verse 4, where it says marriage is honorable. It probably would be better translated matrimony. That is the actual marriage state, when a couple are married, living together as husband and wife. That institution there, matrimony. Notice it. Marriage is honorable in all, and the bed undefiled. But notice what he contrasts it with. Matrimony is honorable. What is matrimony? It's somebody who went through a wedding with exchanging of vows and forming a covenant. What if you don't do that? What about people who say, well, I just want to live together and have sex and never get married, never commit? Say, we don't need a piece of paper. She knows I love her. Yeah, well, You just keep telling yourself that. And maybe she doesn't know that. Maybe you've halfway convinced her, but you know. Okay. Notice what he contrasts it with. The matrimony, the marriage institution, is honorable and the bed undefiled. Having sex together as a husband and wife, the word undefiled, that's kind of a acceptance of a semi-negative, to me. The word is pure. I mean, why we put undefiled? The word is pure, okay? The marriage bed between a husband and a wife is pure in God's eyes. It's pure to have sex with your wife or your mate. That's pure. But notice what the opposite is if it's not marriage. But whoremongers and adulterers God will judge. If you are not in matrimony in your wedding bed, what does God consider you? A whoremonger and an adulterer. Now, do I need to read Revelation 21:8? All whoremongers will find their place in the lake of fire. Is that not clear enough there? People don't put these things together. If you're not married, but you live together, you're a whoremonger and an adulterer. So how important is this piece of paper, as people like to spit it out? It's very important. It's very important. Not that the piece of paper itself is necessarily important, but what the piece of paper represents, a formal ceremony in public with witnesses making a contract through nuptial oaths and agreement to be a husband and a wife. That is very important to God. Very important. Number 9. We read in Romans 13:17. Marriage comes under the category of render therefore to all their dues. This is talking about the laws. I mean the laws of the land, the governments and the law enforcement people and everything else, and all of the regulations that that come out of cities and counties and so on. Render therefore all their dues, tribute to whom tribute, custom to whom custom. Maybe some of you are familiar with somebody who as much as spit on this recently, involving a marriage ceremony that maybe shouldn't have been. You don't just have to obey the laws. It says you should obey the customs. Now, this person said, there's no law that says I can't live with another person. There's no law of the land that says that. And I say, yes, that's true. But there's also no law that says if you do live with a person, you're legally husband and wife, and you can claim all of the benefits that go along to a husband and wife. So maybe it's not an ironclad law that they'll put you in jail for, but it is a custom. Is marriage not a custom in the Western world and everywhere else on the world? I mean, let's face it, every civilized nation on earth has weddings, right? To make two people that are living together legally, a husband and a wife. Every nation on earth has that. Now, maybe it's not a law where they put you in jail, but it's certainly a custom. Paul says you need to honor custom to whom custom. And if you don't, you're sinning. It's as simple as that. Custom to whom custom, fear to whom fear, honor to whom honor. Even tribute. You need a license. You have to pay for it. That's tribute. So I don't want to pay for it. It's the law. It's the law. You say, I know how to drive a car. I don't need a license to drive a car. Yes, you do. Actually, you do. You don't need a license to physically be able to drive a car, but you see, there's laws. And if you break the laws, you're breaking the custom, you're breaking the laws, you're sinning. So I don't see where God says, show me in the Bible where it says you need a license to drive a car. I have people so stupid who say things like that. Show me in the Bible where it says, you can't smoke marijuana or take drugs. Show me that. Actually, I can show you that. Come to think of it, I do know some places I can show you that. Back in Revelation, pharmakia, right? But, show me where it says that in the Bible. It's stupid. Custom to whom custom. That's where it is. Comes under a principle. We have to learn principles, right? Okay. So proper marriage and licensing fulfills every one of these: tribute to whom tribute, custom to whom custom, you see? And therefore we should do it. We should do it. Okay, one more, number 10. You've all heard this one. Let's turn to it. 1 Timothy 4:1. 1 Timothy 4:1. How are we doing on time? Ooh! Okay, this is going to go a little bit longer today. 1 Timothy 4:1. We're going to take one little break here, then we'll come back for another little session on something a little different. Now the Spirit speaks expressly that in the latter times some shall depart from the faith, giving heed to seducing spirits and doctrines of devils. So this is kind of important, right? Speaking lies and hypocrisy, having their conscience seared with a hot iron. And what's the first thing they do? Verse 3. Forbidding to marry. Forbidding to marry. Of course, you can lay that verse directly at the doorsteps of the Catholic Church, where they forbid priests to marry. Now, they have a right to do that, but what does it produce? What does this doctrine of devils, forbidding men who are filled with testosterone, what does it produce? It produces a whole plethora of priests who have sex with little boys. That's what it produces. It's a sin, and it stinks to high heaven. Forbidding to marry. The word marry there is forbidding to wed. Forbidding to take the marriage ceremony, ritual, covenant, nuptials, oaths. He calls it a doctrine of devils. So, can we see how important this is? Yes, I know that I have said many times, nothing you do physical can make you spiritual. I know I've said that. And I stick by that. Even today, I'll say, doing this properly and taking the vows properly, legally, with a license before witnesses, to have a legal marriage is a physical thing, and it will not make you spiritual. It will not make you spiritual. It might help to make you spiritual if everything else be equal and right, but by itself it won't make you spiritual. But it's still the right thing to do. Getting a driver's license to drive a car won't make you spiritual either. But it's the right thing to do. I have here, what you do physically can make you smell like a rose or stink like a pig. That's physical, right? So it doesn't matter. Physical, physical, physical. Throw it all away. No. We're physical creatures. I took a shower before I came in front of you today. I don't want to smell like a pig. What you do physically can make you healthy or make you sick. So does it matter what you do physically? Duh. What you do physically can ensure your rights or land you in jail. Does it matter what you do physically? What you do physically can keep you safe or it can kill you. What you do physically can make legitimate sons or illegitimate bastards. See, I'm bringing this into the marriage thing here. We don't need to be married. No, send your kids to school. Let everybody say, how come you have a different name than your daddy? Oh, well, they're not married. Well, they say they are, but, well, they're not married like my mom and daddy. You know, your mom and dad are living in adultery. That's what our preacher says. Doesn't matter how holy and righteous you think you are. You're putting your kids in an awkward position. Having different names. Why? Because you're too proud to legally get married. What you do physically can be a bed of fornication or an undefiled bed of marriage. What you do physically can make you two fornicators or one legal flesh. And it's all physical. We're talking physical here, not spiritual. I mean, we could add the spiritual dimension to it, but today I'm talking physical. Physical. Every time I bust in the song, I think it's getting physical, Olivia Newton-John. Physical. I hated that song. I hate jolly songs. I just don't like jolly songs, And so I never liked the Beatles much, I want to hold your hand. I mean, it's so ridiculous, Michelle, my belle. These are words that go together well. It doesn't get any dumber than that. So anyway, about twice a day when Denny and I are talking, and he'll say something, and I just got to put it to a song because it's right out of the lyrics. And then he says, I ought to get at least 2 drachmas in my heavenly bank account every time I have to listen to that. Okay, so now, So what I think we've seen here today, to marry, to wed, matrimony, marriage, wedlock, espousal, these are all things that mean virtually the same thing. It's the coming together legally with a license in public before witnesses, before God, exchanging vows, making a covenant, and then having a wedding feast. Because now you've done it right and properly and your friends are happy for you and you're not off in a bed someplace saying, oh, we're husband and wife. In Hebrews 12, God talks about, if you don't live the way He says you should live, you're not sons, but what? Bastards. What are bastards? Illegitimate children of an illegitimate marriage. Don't you get the feeling God thinks it should be done legally? Huh? He doesn't like this thing of bastard. He likens, you want to get spiritual? Now we're spiritual. If you do not obey God the way He wants you to and take His correction, He considers you a spiritual bastard. Now that's God's analogy, not mine. So what does God think about having children out of wedlock? Not much. And you say, oh, but we are married. No, you're not. We just went through espousal, betrothal, wedding, matrimony, marriage. We went through every word. And if you just get together to fornicate, you're not married. Plain and simple. Here's an interesting thought. When you're legally married, not only does God consider you one, but so does the state. If you're not legally married, they don't consider it the same. If you're legally married, you're considered one. Are there any legal ramifications to that? You have one? Gordon, you want to share one?
Well, tax purposes for one thing.
Tax, Social Security, all kinds of things. Yeah. But guess what? What if you yourself are in trouble? What benefit is there if you're legally married?
Makes you both in trouble.
Well, maybe, but here's the point I want to make. If say the woman or the man, either one, is charged with a crime, and you're legally married to that person, they cannot make you testify against them. Why? Because just like God, they consider you one. It would be like testifying against yourself. Isn't that interesting? Yeah? Okay. How far would you take this nonsense? One final thought on this. How far would you take this nonsense? Say, well, we took each other for husband and wife. When? Today. When did you meet? Today. When you enter a marriage contract, people run off to Vegas. They've only known each other 2 days and they get married. They're legally married. Yes, they are. Well, what about this person's thing then? No, you just have to say, I love you as a husband. Well, we're married. So you could do this the very day you met. First night, one night stand. You go to bed and say, take you as my wife, whatever. And now you're married. What if that's all it is, a one night stand? And now you split up. You're still legally married. Can you marry somebody else? By this man's own admission, they're husband and wife. Or let's say they're together a year, and then after a year of fornicating outside of marriage, they say, let's take each other as husband and wife, but we're not going to have a ceremony. We're not going to swear an oath. We're not going to have a covenant. We're not going to have witnesses. We're not going to have a license. We're not going to have it done legally. We're not going to do it by the custom of the land. We just do it right here in bed. And it's a year or two. And a week or two later, they hate each other, and they split. Does this person really tell me for the rest of his life he's going to consider that he's married to that woman? I mean, I may have been born at night, but not last night. He would no more consider himself married. But now, for argument's sake, to fight the system, to come across as super pious and religious and spiritual, he's got this spiritual marriage that doesn't need to be a marriage. It's just what he says, what he believes, you see. So if they were together for a year or so, would they then get a legal divorce with a piece of paper? What if she claimed for the rest of his life, half of what he has is hers? You think he'd go along with that? Probably not. And what if he found another little young flibbity-gibbet that he wanted to marry one night in bed? Huh? You think he would first say to his other wife, let's have a spiritual divorce together? Can't you see the nonsense of it? The total foolishness of the whole thing. Not to mention things like Gordon brought in, You wouldn't be eligible for the person's Social Security, whatever benefits you could got if you were a legal mate according to the custom of the lands and so on. So Jesus did not even contradict the aspect of divorce. They came to him and said, "What can a man divorce for?" And he said that if you put away your wife or divorced her, except it be for a cause of fornication or immorality, porneia is the word, then you cause that person, if they go out and find another mate, you cause them to commit adultery. Because you had no right to divorce that person, see? Now, he doesn't say it specifically, but you can deduce, you can lawfully, legally, and rightly deduce from what is said something that isn't said. If you shouldn't divorce for that, except for fornication, that means for fornication, you can divorce. So if Jesus Christ is putting his approval on a certain aspect of immorality where divorce can be involved, then he's also backing up the fact that it was a legal marriage until the divorce came about. Okay?